Elliot, I'm guessing. Do your boys call you ESP? Because it flows
Yeah,
perfectly.
it does. It does. When you have two, hyphenated last name, it sets up well. So you can definitely call me ESP.
So you are super high on your Eagles, kind of like Cakes was with the Washington football team. You see at least 10 wins, and all we've been doing here, and Cakes has been the leader in the clubhouse on the show, is clubbing your head coach.
Well, again, it goes back to his opening press conference, which was, Elliot would admit this, not impressive when he got in front of the mic the first time. But maybe, you know what? That's a minor part of the job, dealing with the media. I hope he's a much better football coach than he is a public speaker. That's all. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, look, I think his introductory press conference was not great. He's gotten better. What I would say about Nick Sirianni, though, is I think he does, when you just look at his resume, I think he does come with a good resume. Learning under Frank Reich, coaching receivers, coaching quarterbacks. He hasn't called plays, which is certainly a concern. The good news, though, is he's in a division where you don't really have to be a great head coach. You really only have Ron Rivera as a great head coach. So we'll see how it turns out. But I agree the press conference certainly didn't set the right tone for the Nick Sirianni era.
So hold on. So we always do the bit here, and everyone makes fun of us of going through wins and losses. We'll do it like before the draft, after the draft, before free agency, after free agency. Of course, we'll do it, before the regular season. And we're all over the place here. We're anywhere from like 6 wins to 10 or 11 for Washington.
Yep.
You're on the record for 10. Is that what you're saying? For
10
Philly?
plus is what he tweeted.
10 plus
For the Eagles.
Yeah.
For the Eagles.
Yeah.
I have met 11. Yeah, 11 and 6. Yeah.
Wow. All right. So let's go through it a little bit. And
You
give
must
us
be
the
super
rationale.
high on Jalen Hurts.
Honestly, it's not so much being high on Jalen Hurts. I think it's a combination of things. One, Carson Wentz was the worst quarterback in the NFL last year, arguably. So the fact that when you get that level of quarterback play, like that poor, the whole roster is going to look worse than it actually is. I mean, Carson, I think, averaged almost close to 2 turnovers a game when he was in there. It's just impossible to win that way. So I think even if Jalen Hurts can step in next year and be a top 20 quarterback, the Eagles will be considerably better. I also look at the Eagles roster, and I think they have potentially a very good offensive line. They have a very good defensive line. And again, I think they'll get better quarterback play. So if you have those 3 things, you're going to be a pretty good team in the NFL.
What happened with Carson? I mean, I know there's a million guesses, but what is your best guess on what happened with him? Is it simply a confidence thing?
So I've covered Carson since he got to Philadelphia, right? So I've seen the whole Carson saga in Philly. And to me, what it really comes down to is Carson suffered 2 really bad injuries. He tore his ACL, and then he suffered a fractured back. And almost any player is going to have a hard time recovering from that. Carson in 2017, prior to the ACL injury, he was one of the best quarterbacks I've ever covered or seen, right? I mean, he was playing at that level, I thought, certainly in an Eagles uniform. So, but when you tear your ACL and you break your back, things go downhill, and that's what you've seen with Carson. I know people want to point to the Jalen Hurts thing, and if they don't draft Jalen Hurts, he's probably still here. But ultimately, I don't think Carson had a mental breakdown or anything. I just don't think Carson's that good anymore because of the physical, things he's had to deal with. So I think that's really why Carson's time with the Eagles is over.
We're joined by Eliot Shorr-Parks at Eliot Shorr-Parks on Twitter, Eagles reporter for 94 WIP in Philadelphia. Now, Hurts, didn't have a lot of experience, but the 4 appearances he made were encouraging. 2 400-plus yard total yards between passing and rushing. So Sirianni has to love the upside. It's just a matter of getting that completion percentage up, which is at 52%, and upping the passing. The rushing part is there, but the passing still needs some work, obviously.
Yeah, so I think the completion percentage is a bit misleading. Obviously, it needs to be better than 52%. I'm not disagreeing with you on that. I do think last year, the Eagles, the receivers were not great. They've added Devontae Smith. I think that will help. But the other thing is Jalen Hurts, and I don't want to make excuses for him, but ultimately last year he didn't have an offseason, a preseason, or really any reps up until he was thrown into the game, right? So I think he was in a little bit of a unique situation compared to other rookie quarterbacks. So I know this is his second year, but in some ways it's a little bit more like his rookie year. I mean, the Eagles are having rookie minicamp today. I don't know if he'll be out there or not, but I think just getting the reps this offseason is going to be big for him after he didn't get any first-team reps last offseason.
So I'm looking at your breakdown here week by week, and it looks like you have them really doing very well in their out-of-conference stuff,
Yeah.
right? That's where I see them. Like now, Washington has a very similar schedule, but I see you guys don't have Kansas City. You guys don't have Buffalo like we do.
Well, the Eagles do play Kansas City
They
at
do.
home.
They do.
Yeah.
All right.
Yep.
And you have that as what? A loss, I assume.
Yeah, I think that's a loss. Yeah, I think that's safe to assume.
Yeah, but you have San Francisco. Go through the out of conference. Like you have them week 1 right against the Falcons. W. Yeah.
Yeah, well, the Falcons were worse than the Eagles were last year, and the Eagles were a complete train wreck. So I think that's an advantageous start for them. The Eagles' new defensive coordinator, Jonathan Gannon, was maybe the most sought-after defensive coordinator in the NFL this past offseason. Not as a head coach, but I mean strictly as a coordinator. So I think that's an underrated addition to the staff that is not getting the attention, especially because every time Sirianni talks, it's a national story. But I think Gannon is going to be a good addition for them. So I do think they can win week 1.
Are you surprised that Zach Ertz is still on the roster at this point? I thought he would have been dealt by now, with the emergence of Dallas Goedert. Ertz wants a new deal. He sees the money that guys like Kelsey are getting, and he sees his reduced role there in Philly. Are you shocked that he's still on the roster? What do you think the ultimate landing spot is for Zach Ertz?
I'm very surprised he's still here. I mean, this is something a year in the making. Last year, as you mentioned, when you saw the big money paid out to tight ends, Zach Ertz wanted that money, and he was worthy of it at that point, right? He had been one of the most productive tight ends in the NFL over the last few years. But when he didn't get that money, and then he had a really down year, that complicates things because now he's still on the roster, but I don't think there's a team out there that's going to give him anywhere close to the type of money he wants, and the Eagles are not going to keep him. So at this point, I believe he'll either be released or maybe traded for a 6th or 7th round pick. But the fact that we're so close to June 1st, if they get rid of him after June 1st, the cap implications are not as bad. So I think that's kind of what the holdup is.
All right, let's talk about the rest of the division. Let's start with Washington. What is sort of your take on them? I'm the only fan here of the group, so I can be accused of being biased. There's no question. But I love what they've done in the offseason. I think they've upgraded everywhere. I think it's been a fantastic offseason for Washington. I mean, obviously the most important position is a bit of a question mark at quarterback, but I think they're actually getting the best Ryan Fitzpatrick, the best football that he's played in his career. So if that continues, I think they're in a really good spot. How do you evaluate Washington as an opponent within the division?
Yeah, I think Washington has maybe the best roster in the division. I talked about the lines for the Eagles. Washington's right there. I mean, Washington probably has a better offensive line. They probably have a better defensive line. What's interesting is the Eagles actually had more sacks last year, which I was surprised about. But regardless, I think Washington has a better defensive line. But you mentioned it. It's Fitzpatrick for me. I just when you have a guy that's played the NFL this long, I think he's been a starter in 10-plus games 8 times in his career, and he's only had a winning record once. So, I mean, anything's possible. He's going to go there with a better roster than he's probably ever played for. But at the same time, I think everyone always says the teams that he's played for aren't any good. Well, he holds blame in that. He's a quarterback, right? So, I mean, if he was really good, the team probably would have been better. So I think Washington is really set up to win, but the Fitzpatrick thing is just such a massive question mark. I have a hard time viewing them as, the clear-cut favorite to win the division.
If you had to bet on how many starts he has this year for Washington, what would you bet?
It's a great question. I mean, I guess with 17 games, I'd probably set the over-under at something like 10.5, 11.5. I don't think he'll get benched. I would be surprised by that, but just you never know with injuries. So, I would put it somewhere around there.
All right, what about Dallas? Everybody every year, I feel like it's a sexy pick, and it's annoying to me. Now, Jason pointed out, he's not here today, but he pointed out that, they did win 13 games, I don't know, a few years ago, and they've had some big seasons. But I always feel like they disappoint more often than not. I guess a lot of it obviously going to depend on the health of Dak.
Yeah, interesting fact about Dallas. Over the last 10 years, they've had an over-under of 9.5, which is what they opened at this year, 3 times, and they failed to reach that every time. So I agree with you that Dallas consistently underperforms when they're expected to be good. Now, Dallas, to me, obviously, it comes down to Dak. Having been here in Philadelphia and seeing what a season-ending injury can do to somebody, I am skeptical somewhat that Dak will come back and be the best quarterback he was, the best version of himself that he was before. If he is, he's the best quarterback in the division, and that's a huge advantage for Dallas. They have a ton of weapons. I think getting Dan Quinn as a defensive coordinator is really going to help them. But I have to see Dak return to Dak before I'm going to be as optimistic about Dallas as other people.
All right, and then what about the Giants?
He clubs the Giants.
Yeah, I want to hear your take on the Giants. Good. I mean, you're out on Daniel Jones then?
Yeah, I mean, look, when you're worse your second year than you are your first year, I think that's a pretty bad sign. And he fumbles it all the time. I just don't think he's shown enough for me to believe that he's a quarterback that can lead a team. And I think what's interesting about the Giants is, they're 6-10 last year, and now they're being discussed as a team that's on the up and that's coming up, that should be viewed as a contender for the division. I just don't see it. They have the worst offensive line in the division. I think they probably have the worst defensive line. I think they have the worst head coach, and I think they have the worst quarterback. So when you have those four things, I just don't view you as a super competitive team. They were 1-7 last year before they turned it around with a few bad wins at the end of the year. So look, anything's possible in the NFC East. I just don't view the Giants as a real contender.
Well, I think that people are higher on the Giants because they get Saquon Barkley back, and they boosted their wide receiving core.
Yeah, well, Saquon's coming off a torn ACL, right, which for a running back I think is concerning. And you can have all the receivers in the world. If your quarterback's not good and he doesn't have time to throw the ball, really doesn't matter. I mean, their offensive line was arguably not just the worst in the division, the worst in the entire NFL last year when it came to pass protection. And that's why part of the reason Daniel Jones struggled. But when you have a bad line and a bad quarterback, I like Kenny Golladay. I think he's extremely underrated. I'm not sure it's going to matter.
I don't know. Do you stand – Saquon is obviously a freak talent, but you're right. He's coming off the injury for one. And for two, this is the argument I make with the guys, and they break my balls about it. He's very all or nothing. Like, he could have 180 against you, or it could be one of those games where he has, like, 32. I don't know if you feel that same way.
Yeah, I think that's somewhat of a fair criticism. I'd also say that, look, Saquon's great. It's not like they were anywhere near to being a good team when he was on the field, right? So with the bad offensive line, again, it just makes it so hard for these skill position players that they have to be good. And that's why when I look at Washington and Philly, I see two teams that I think will be two of the best in the division because they are so strong along the lines. I understand that the receiver position, the running back, like those are the fun positions to talk about. But ultimately, what decides the division is who has the best line. That's why Washington won it last year. They had the best defensive line. They had the best offensive line. Outside of that, everything else was pretty even. So I just think when I look at the Giants, yes, Saquon's exciting, but the line is terrible, and that's going to really diminish a lot of their offensive production.
Eliot, appreciate the insight. It's Eliot Shorr-Parks from Odyssey Sports. Thanks, pal.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Yep. Sounds good. Talk to you guys soon.
All right, buddy.
He joined us on the BetQL guest hotline. Bet smarter and
you
beat
hear
the
that,
books.
Valdez?
Download the BetQL app today or visit BetQL.com.
Hit best roster in the division right there.
Everyone seems to be copycatting my stance early in the year.
They're jumping on board.
Hey, a listener hit me up on Twitter, and he did remind me, and I forgot this because I know that I brought this up when they acquired him. He did remind me that Fitz was the 5th-ranked quarterback in QBR last season, by the way.
It's a feather in the old cap.
And that's not just like quarterback rating, like the old school one. That's like this fancy one that everyone's all high on, right? 5th in QBR. You know who he was ahead of? Your boy Lamar.
He was fine.
Right there with some elite company.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Unanimous MVP.
I'm not saying he's MVP.
And now he's coming to a situation where he's unquestioned starter, putting it too boldly for Fitz.
Yeah. Here's the company.
I think so.
I think that's what he is, basically.
I think he is. Here's the company, the top 5 QBR last year. I mean, all right, you mock me, but whatever. If you had to think of one stat that's the most encompassing stat.
I don't disagree with that stat. I just know this, that you're like making this argument for Fitzpatrick over Lamar when unless you're a lunatic, you would make a trade of Fitzpatrick for Lamar in a heartbeat.
Maybe based on age. I don't know if they were both 37. I don't know, or whatever. But Aaron Rodgers, Pat Mahomes, Josh Allen, Tannehill, which is bizarre to me. I don't understand that kind of career arc. I don't get that, but maybe it's
he's been resurrected in Tennessee.
Yeah, maybe that's what Fitzpatrick is doing, and then Ryan Fitzpatrick.
Yep.
How many starts did each of the 4 guys ahead of him get though?
No, they had more.
16 out of 16.
Yeah, they had more. I mean, maybe he had 8 or 9. I can't remember what it was.
If they hadn't force-fed Tua onto the field, Fitzpatrick would have had more starts.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
that's true. Anyway, you can vote. It looks like most people on the Junks Radio poll brought to you by Vandermeter Homes. I put 4 options. So how many starts do you think Ryan Fitzpatrick gets? 17 out of 17. Then there's a range: 10 to 17, 5 to 9, or 4 or less.
10 to 17 is a guarantee.
65% have the 10 to 17.
Yeah. Then you made that
I
range
think I
too
might
big.
lean on 5 to 9.
You think benching because
I think
poor play?
I think I can buy into Drab's theory that he's going to be benched at some point because the team's struggling, he's struggling, throws a bunch of picks, and they just go to the next guy. Ron Rivera clearly showed last year he'll just go to the next guy.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe you're right. For some reason, I feel like we're getting a guy playing the best football of his career at the end, and then we're going to see
He's
some.
peaking late in life.
Have we figured out what you're going to do if he's benched?
I'm not promising anything. You're trying to paint me in a corner.
There's always a wacky bit in store.
You want to see my pubes or something?
Still got months to figure it out, Valdez.
Yeah.
Got nothing but time.
I just think he's gonna play. I just think he's gonna play pretty well.